170 to 200. That's approximately how many days I spend in the field every single year, hunting, fishing, hiking, or on some sort of survival challenge. Now, that much time in the field will teach you two things. One, it'll teach you a lot about the woods, and two, it'll teach you what gear works and what doesn't. Now, in this video, we're gonna go over some of the gear that I've used over the years. We're gonna take a look at how my gear selection has changed and adapted over time. And also, we're gonna talk about what I'm gonna be using on this year's adventures. Now, everything that I cover here is not going to be for everybody or every situation, but no matter what your budget is or where your adventures take you, you're bound to pick up some tips while I go over all this stuff that I've got laid in front of me. Now, before I launch into this, I want to give you a quick disclaimer because a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about today is made by the people that sponsor and help support these videos. With that said, I use the gear that I use because it works for me. Every single day I get multiple offers from brands that want me to pitch stuff on my channel. Everything from crossbows and e-bikes to financial services, dietary supplements, you name it, and I get it. I've turned all of those things down because it's stuff that I wouldn't typically use, and if I'm not gonna use it myself, I'm not gonna feel good about telling someone else that they should. The gear that I'm gonna talk about in this video is gear that I've settled on after years of trial and error. Now, this is gonna be kind of a long video, and most of you aren't gonna be interested in every single thing that I'm gonna talk about, so I'm gonna break this up into chapters, and you should be able to kind of scroll through that and navigate those by taking your mouse and just hovering over the play bar at the bottom of your screen. We're gonna start off talking about footwear, and then we'll talk about clothing, shelters, sleeping bags, and then just kind of random miscellaneous stuff. So when it comes to boots, I have worn and worn out more pairs than I can count over the years. For most of the backcountry hunting, hiking, or exploring that I do, I prefer a mid-weight boot, 8 to 9 inches with little to no insulation. If you're planning on backpacking in super rough country or your ankles just need a little bit more support, you might think about bumping that up into kind of a mountain style boot. But in my opinion, the mid-weight boots like this are just far more versatile. They're more comfortable, they're lighter weight, and for me, they're just a better all-around boot. Now, for a budget option, one of the things that I used to wear a lot was the Danner pronghorns. Just something to keep in mind, it's been probably 15 years since I've had a pair of pronghorns on my feet, but I did like them. They were lightweight, they were comfortable. The problem that I had at that time, now a lot can change over 15 years, but at that time, they would just wear out too quickly for me. I had 2 pairs that I wore out in less than 6 months. Now, something to keep in mind is, one, I put a lot of miles on these boots in rough country. And so what I subject my boots to is probably gonna far exceed what the average hunter or hiker is gonna put their boots through. And so if you are on a budget, you might consider something like those Danner pronghorns. They're probably gonna be a good option for most folks. Now, if you're gonna be putting a lot of miles on your boots in rough country, if you want something that's gonna last, you're probably gonna have to spend a little bit more for them. For example, I've got 2 different comparable boots here, semi-comparable. This is an uninsulated, and this one's got 200 grams of insulation. So this is the Crispy Nevada. This is the Schnee's Timberline. I've worn these boots over the last 4 years or so. Wore the Schnee's for a couple of seasons, and then this last season I moved to the Crispy Nevadas. Now these, I like both of these boots. The Crispy Nevadas, they sent these boots to me, and literally the absolute next day after getting these in the mail, I packed an elk out of the canyon. Finn had shot a cow, and with no break-in period, no problems at all. They were really good boots. The problem that I have come across with the Crispy Nevadas, now again, this has been a little over a year, they may have changed things, but they're not very waterproof. When you compare them to the Schnee's Timberlines here, these are much more they're not waterproof, but they're water resistant. And so if I had to put these 2 boots head to head and choose one, I'd probably have to go with the Schnee's on this, just simply because my feet got wet in the Crispies. But again, both good options. These boots are gonna retail for, I don't know, $400 to $450 maybe, something like that. But you know, when you spend that amount on boots, you can pretty much guarantee that you're gonna get a couple of seasons out of them, even if you subject them to the type of abuse that I do, which is many miles in really rough country. If you're just kind of a casual hunter and you might be out for a week or two out of the year, you're gonna get many years out of a good pair of boots like this. So that's kind of my early season choices. For late season, if it's gonna get super cold, the pair of boots that I have been wearing for the last, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 years are these Schnee's pack boots. These are the boots that I took on a loan, and they're heavy, but they are very nice for late season. They're warm. They've got a removable liner, a removable felted wool liner in here, and I like that because if you're out, you're putting out a lot of effort, your feet sweat a little bit, you can pull these liners out and hang them up above the wood stove and dry them out overnight. Very nice boots. The other option that I typically use is something like these muck boots. Now, these are not something that you're going to be wanting to hike in mile after mile, but for boggy ground, soggy stuff, or just slipping them on to go out and check the cows or something like that, I like these. Now, this year we're going to be spending the entire month of September up in Alaska, and a good chunk of that time we're going to be out chasing moose, and these are the boots that I'm going to take up there. I'm not going to take my hiking boots, primarily because we've got some weight limitations on the plane that we're taking in there, and so we're kind of having to dial back on the amount of gear that we're taking. So I'm taking one pair of boots, and these muck boots are going to be it, primarily because 80 to 90% of the time that we're out there, we're gonna be in soggy, like muskeg type stuff, and that's where these things really shine. The thing that I don't particularly care for when it comes to muck boots is that when they get wet, it's very difficult to dry these things out. And if it gets cold, if these boots get damp inside and get clammy, your feet are going to get cold. It's just, in my experience anyway, without a boot dryer, without a proper boot dryer, it's just impossible to dry these things out in a backcountry kind of camp type situation. Now the other thing, this is going to be kind of a specialized deal, but since we were talking about Alaska, I went up last year and I only had my muck boots, and I found myself in a situation where we had a bull that was bedded out in this big open meadow, and we had to cross a bunch of water to get there. I ended up having to strip down to my underwear and walk barefoot. It was a whole deal. So this year I went ahead and bought a pair of these, the Simms G3 waders, and a pair of their wading boots. This is brand new to me. I have not had these. I've put it on just to make sure they fit. I have not had these in the field at all, but all of the research that I've done on them, these are the waders to go with if you want something that's going to last you. I'll have more details on this if I end up doing another video on this next year, because I'll have put these through the ringer up in Alaska. So the clothing that you choose to take with you on a remote backcountry trip is one of the absolute biggest considerations. Your clothing is your first line of defense against the elements. It needs to perform, and it needs to be versatile. So planning out this trip that we've got to Alaska this year, I really had to think about what I'm going to take and what I'm going to leave, because we are limited on space. Not really space, but weight, because of the plane and the runways and all of that stuff. And so what I've got in this bag, this is what I'm taking for the entire month of September. So anybody that's been following my content for very long knows that I am an absolute proponent of merino wool, especially when it comes to base layers. I like wool for a number of different reasons. Number one is that you can wear this stuff for days, weeks, even months at a time, and it does not accumulate, it doesn't hold body odor like synthetics will. And probably the best example that I can give of that is when I was on a loan. I was out there for 74 days. I did not take a bath, and I wore the same clothes without washing them for the entire time. And my base layers were merino wool. You could not do that with synthetics without smelling horrible. And that's one of the considerations that if you're a hunter, that's one of the things that you need to take into consideration. Number two is merino wool just feels nice against your skin. It's not like the regular old coarse wool that's scratchy. It feels like a cotton t-shirt. And for me personally, I'm just not a big fan of the way that synthetics feel against my skin. And number three, wool retains something like 80% of its insulating value, even if it's wet or damp. The only downside that I see to merino versus synthetics is it does take a little bit longer to dry once it does get wet. Some of these synthetics that they're making today, I mean, they just wick and dry so fast. But for me personally, the pros that I talked about for merino just they far outweigh that. All right, so with all that said, I'm just gonna go through my bag here. This is the stuff that I'm gonna be taking with me to Alaska, and I'm gonna go through all of the different stuff in here. Now, most of what I'm gonna pull out of here, I'd say 99% of what I'm gonna pull out here is made by First Light. First Light's one of the sponsors of this channel. Now, with that said, I've been wearing First Light stuff since I think probably 2009 or 2010, way before they became a sponsor of this channel. I started wearing First Light stuff because it's good, and because they were one of the first companies to really push public lands conservation, and I appreciated that. So with that said, we'll just jump right in here. We'll start from the absolute base of base, underwear. So these are some of the Wick long boxer briefs. You know, warm weather, this is what I'm gonna have on underneath. Once it starts getting a little bit cooler, I'll add these. This is the Kiln Long Johns. These things go with me on every single hunt. Another piece that I'll always have with me, this is the Wick short sleeve. That's one of my primary base layers, and then the other one is the Kiln kind of quarter zip hoodie. So these four things, the Wick long boxer briefs, the Kiln Long Johns, the Wick short sleeve, and the Kiln QZ hoodie, these form the foundation of everything else that comes next. And these things go with me, like I said, on just about every backcountry thing that I do. And then the other thing that I always have with me, and it's probably buried in here somewhere, is a merino beanie cap. So when it comes to outerwear, I use a combination of both wool and synthetics. Now, over the past year or two, First Light's actually come out with 2 pair of pants that I really like. The pants that I have on right now, these are the Trace pants for early season. I love these things. They're lightweight. They dry super fast. They're quiet, which is very important for me because I do a lot of bow hunting. So I'll wear these things all summer long during the turkey season on through September. And once you start getting into October, weather starts cooling down a little bit, all I'll do is throw a pair of these Kiln Long Johns under them, and I can wear these things into early November before I move to something a little bit heavier. The other recent pair of pants that they've come out with that I really like are the 308 lined pants. These things have a fleece liner in them. They've got vents in them so you can open them up. So if you're chugging up a hill, you can dump some heat. So when the weather really turns south, you start getting a lot of wind and really cold temperatures, I'll take a pair of those Long Johns, put them underneath those 308 lined pants. And I've used that combination in pretty extreme conditions, late season muzzleloader elk hunts, where it's well below zero with 20-30 mile an hour winds, and you can't beat them. So for my upper body early season, a lot of times I'll just wear this Wick short sleeve. Early in the mornings when it's cool, I'll have this quarter zip over the top. And then the other thing that is always in my pack is, even in early season, is this Brooks down vest. This thing weighs virtually nothing. It packs up to the size of a soda can, and you throw it in your pack, you never even know it's there. But if you're, especially in the mountains, high elevation, it can be pretty cool in the morning. Having this thing in the pack is really, really nice. So for my outer layer, my shell, depending on what I'm doing, I'll go two different directions. If I'm on a late season muzzleloader hunt or something like that, a lot of times I'll wear this. This is the Uncompahgre Foundry jacket. It's a good shell. It's windproof, it's warm. The problem with it for some of the other stuff that I do is that it's just not very quiet. And so on those bow hunts that I do, this thing stays home, and I'll switch over to either just a heavy wool shirt, or I've got a heavy wool pullover from Asbel Wool. I get questions about that anytime I wear it in a video, and those are the folks that make it. So this year, First Light sent me this new, it's like almost like a fleece lined sweater pullover thing. I'm not sure what this is called. I have not tested this out. This is called the Navigator. But this is something, I'll take this to Alaska and just have an extra kind of a mid layer. Now, depending on the conditions, I'll mix and match this stuff. Sometimes I'll substitute things and just, match the conditions. All right, so that, I think, pretty much does it for the clothing. We'll throw that back there. All right, moving on to shelters. So we do all kinds of different backcountry hunting, and sometimes the whole family be there, sometimes it's just me and I'm out by myself. And so I use a lot of different shelters, and I'm fortunate to have a bunch of different stuff to choose from. Now, on some of those solo, backcountry minimalist things that I do, I'll just have a simple tarp with me. And the one that I've been using is this Talus tarp from Argali. I'm not sure what the weight on this is. It's pretty small, pretty lightweight. And if the bugs aren't terrible, and if the weather is fairly mild, this is really all you need. On the other end of the spectrum, we go out sometimes at our elk camp and the whole family be there, and we've got a huge wall tent from Montana Canvas, and we've got the whole 9 yards. We've got cots, we've got a wood stove, the whole kitchen set up. And that, for that type of situation, it's really nice to have that. It's super comfortable, but it's also bulky and it's really heavy. But for those late season hunts when you're camping close to the truck, having a nice wall tent to come back to with a wood stove in it and a nice cot, it's kind of hard to beat that if the weight is not an issue. If the weight is an issue, then we move into things like what I'm going to take to Alaska this year. So this year I'm actually taking two shelters to Alaska. I'm taking the tarp and I'm taking the 6-man teepee from Argali. And I'm also taking the insert that goes into that and the wood stove to go along with that. The reason I'm taking both of these shelters is, one, I'll use this tarp for setting up just an extra area to be dry. The area of Alaska that we're going to this year gets a lot of rain in September, and so having just another place to get out, maybe do some cooking or just hanging out is going to be really, really nice. The other reason that I'm taking this with us is if I do happen to kill a moose, we've got quarters hanging. I want to be able to put a tarp over the top of that and shed any rain. Once this meat starts to dry and develops a rind, I do not want to get that meat wet again. That's when bacteria starts to grow. That's when you start having problems with meat spoilage. So keeping that meat dry is very, very important, and that's one of the reasons I'm taking this tarp. Now, last year I went up to Alaska and I was up there by myself, and I took the 4-person tent from Argali. It had the insert in it, and I also had a wood stove with me. Now, for one guy, all of his gear, having firewood and everything in there, the 4-person tent was fantastic. This year, we're gonna have River up there, my intern. He's gonna be running the camera. And so for both of us to be in there, have all of our gear out there, and then also be able to store firewood and everything, the 6-person is really gonna be a lot more comfortable. Even though we could cram into the 4-person, the sixth person is just going to give us more space to spread out. So anytime I talk about one of these floorless teepees, I always get folks asking, why in the world would you choose to take a shelter that doesn't have a floor? Now, for me, the absolute biggest reason to choose a floorless shelter is they're just far more versatile. The problem with a shelter with an integrated floor is that unless you have a big vestibule where you can put your boots, where you can store all of your gear, where you can store firewood, you're gonna have to bring that stuff into the tent with you, and things just get really messy. With a floorless shelter with a half insert, you can have half the tent that's dedicated to your sleeping area. That's where all of your dry stuff goes. And then the other side of the tent is basically just a giant vestibule. And inside that, you can store your firewood. You can take your boots off out there. You can put any kind of a wet waders or wet clothing out there. You can hang things up and let them dry. And I like to have that division in the shelter just because it helps to keep things clean. Now, during those wet weather or late season hunts, having a wood stove is fantastic. I cannot tell you how nice it is to come back after a long day of being in the field and stoke up a fire, not only just to warm yourself up, but it just puts you in a better mood. And then the other big thing is on those late hunts, especially if you're in wet weather, having a wood stove in the tent is for me anyway, it's very important to just dry things out. I can take my stuff, I can hang it up in the top of the tent, take my boots, pull out the inserts or pull out the insoles in them, kind of open them up, hang them up top, get a fire going, and usually by morning they're dry. All right, so we're gonna move on to sleeping bags. Now I've got 3 different bags here to talk about different materials and some of the different bags that I've used over the years. When it comes to sleeping bags, you've got basically 2 choices. You've got your down bags and you've got your synthetics. They both have their pros and cons, and what you choose is just gonna depend on how you plan on using the bag, and then also your budget factors into it a little bit. So the synthetic bags tend to be a little bit heavier than a down bag of comparable insulative value, but they're also more affordable. Down is lightweight and it is super warm in cold, dry conditions, but it tends to be a little bit more spendy and in prolonged wet conditions. And this is one of the big things to take into consideration. In that type of conditions, down bags can lose some of their loft and lose their insulative qualities. So most folks aren't gonna have multiple bags for multiple situations. Most people are gonna have one bag and they're gonna wanna use it for everything. Now, if it was me and I had to choose one bag for all circumstances, for the type of things that I do, which is mountain hunting, oftentimes at high elevation, relatively dry conditions, I'm gonna choose a down bag. In my opinion, they're just more versatile. Now, like I said, in prolonged wet weather, like we're gonna be experiencing in Alaska, the down bags can lose some of their loft. Now, the way that I mitigate for that is that while I'm gone off hunting during the day, I open my bags up and I let them air out. If it's really wet, I'll hang them in the tent, and anytime we get any sun and I'm around camp, I'll hang them outside, put them in the sun, and they are bone dry in, I'd say, less than an hour. So when it comes to sleeping pads, I like the inflatable pads. This is one of the Thermarest Neo Airs. I've been using this pad or some variation of this Neo Air pad for probably 15 years. Personally, I have never had any issues with these pads on any kind of an adventure. Some people, when you start looking at the pros and cons of different types of pads, one of the cons of these is that they can deflate. You can get a hole in them, you can puncture them, and if you do that, and this is your only type of sleeping pad, and you're way out in the middle of the bush, you're gonna be wishing that you had a different type of pad. Now, like I said, I have never had a problem with that. I'm also very careful about how I prep the place that I'm going to be laying this pad down so that there's not thorns or pine cones or anything like that that's gonna potentially puncture these bags. I like these because they're relatively lightweight. They pack down pretty small as compared to some of the closed cell foam pads that you'll see other folks using. And they're comfortable. They're really, really comfortable when compared to some of those other thinner closed cell foam pads. Now, one of the things that I'll sometimes carry in conjunction with that pad is one of these very thin foam pads. This thing's like 1/8 of an inch thick. It's super lightweight. I'm not sure what this weighs, but it isn't much. And laying this down on the ground before you lay your pad down is just gonna help to protect that pad from any kind of thorns or anything else that might poke a hole in it. Now, the other thing that I would highly recommend that you carry with you if you're gonna go with an inflatable pad is some sort of patch kit. I personally have never had to use one, but last year we went on a mule deer hunt in the backcountry. The fella that I was hunting with, he wasn't as careful with his pad, laid it down on a pine cone, got a hole in it, and it deflated. And luckily I had that repair kit with us. We were able to patch it up and he was good to go for the rest of the trip. If I hadn't had that, he'd have been sleeping on a pine bough bed for the rest of the trip. All right, so we've gone through kind of the big things that I wanted to cover: the boots, the clothes, the kind of the sleep system here. Now we're gonna take a look at just kind of like some odds and ends, some random stuff. So you guys have seen, if y'all have watched my hunting videos, you guys have seen me carrying this pack. This is the Striker XL from Kifaru. Now, again, just like with the bags, most people are probably gonna have one pack. They're not gonna have, these things are expensive. You're not gonna have, 3 different packs for different situations. And so if you have to have one pack that's gonna do it all, from a day pack to being able to haul out quarters, in my opinion, I just like this one. This thing, the bag comes away from the frame. You can put a big old quarter between the pack and the frame. And just, about a week or 10 days ago, I hauled out half of an elk on this thing. I had 120 pounds of meat in this pack that we hauled out of the canyon. But it's also small enough that you can suck everything down and it works great as a day pack. I've used this pack on backpacking trips up to 10 days by using stuff sacks or dry bags, and again, just pulling the pack away from the frame, sticking a big dry bag down in between with all of your stuff down in there, and it just kind of expands the capacity of this, what would normally be looked at as kind of a day pack. In this pack, I've got some trekking poles stuck in there, and that's one of the things that when I first started hunting out west, I never used trekking poles. I just thought they were something extra to carry along and never really used them until I used them. If you don't have trekking poles, you're having to use your legs for everything. All of your balance, all of your thrust to get up those hills, everything is put on your quads. Having those 2 extra points in contact with the ground are a massive benefit. When you're chugging up those hills, being able to use your upper body to get up those hills is just, it makes it so much better. If you try hauling out a load without trekking poles and then use a decent quality pair of poles on your next load, you're gonna see a huge difference in how much effort or how much less effort it takes or how much easier it is with those trekking poles versus without. And I think if you try it, you're gonna be a convert and you're gonna start carrying those things just like I was. So the rest of this gear that I'm gonna talk about is just kind of scattered around. It's all odds and ends. A lot of it's gonna stay in my pack and some of it's gonna stay back at camp. But I'm gonna start with my bino harness because this has just got multiple things in it. These are the Vortex Razor UHD 10x42s. I like 10x42s because they're a good compromise between weight and magnification. One of the big benefits of having a good pair of binoculars is that low light, I can look out across one of these fields or look on the side of a mountain and you can see so much more because of the light gathering abilities of a good pair of binoculars than you can with your naked eye. I can look out across here in very dim light, and with my naked eye it just kind of all looks gray, but when you look across there with a good pair of binoculars, you can pick animals out. And that's really the difference between a low-end pair of binoculars and a high-end pair, is the performance in low light. And oftentimes, low light, if you're a hunter, low light is oftentimes your best chance at seeing critters. And so having good binoculars, if you can afford it, having a good pair of binoculars really goes a long way in your ability to find animals. Now, with that said, when I first started hunting out west, I had a pair of Nikon Monarchs. I think they were $300, and I glassed up a ton of animals with those binoculars, but that's all I could afford at that time. I would say when it comes to spending money on optics, I would say get the best you can, because it really does make a difference in the number of critters that you're gonna see. And if you're spending a lot of time looking through your glasses, spotting, looking through good glass is just gonna be easier on your eyes. So also in my binoculars, this thing, I've got an elk call over there that's gonna come off before the season. Over here in this side pocket, I've got a milkweed pod. These things are the absolute best wind indicators on the planet. Those little smoke bottles that you see people using, they're okay, but the problem with those is they give you the wind right where you're at, but you don't know what the wind is doing 20, 30, 40 yards away from you. When you use these little milkweed pods, these things drift forever, and you can see them for 40, 50 yards. And so you can see if the wind does different things as it's going across the canyon or across the landscape. I love these things. Can't beat them. I collect, a couple of dozen of these in late summer when they're just about to open, and I put them in a bag for use later in the year. I've got a little light here that I carry all the time. This is a Phantom Photon Micro, just kind of a backup light that I have just in case my headlight runs out of batteries or if I just forget my headlight. And then in the back of this case, I've got a Speed Goat 2.0 from MKC. This is what I do 95% of my skinning and field dressing with, is these little knives. And I usually have two of them, one that just stays in my bino harness and one that lives in my pack. And then I also carry this little Work Sharp field sharpener. These things are nice. You've got also ceramic right there and then a leather strap on the other side. This is what I do all the sharpening with when I'm in the field. Water bottle, the other option is the water bladders. Personally, I don't really care for them just because they get slimy and kind of nasty over time. These silky saws, these guys make, there's dozens and dozens of different styles of these things for different uses. I've got several of them. This is the Gomboy 210. This is a pretty good size for keeping in your pack. If you're gonna be processing firewood for your wood stove, or even if you need a bone saw, I personally don't use a bone saw. I just cut everything at the knuckles. But if you do want one, these are good options. And like I said, for trimming up trees or for processing firewood, these things are fantastic. These little silky saws are razor sharp, and you can really get through some wood very, very quickly. So we're gonna be taking dehydrated meals on this trip, and to boil the water for those dehydrated meals, I've got my Vargo bot here. I've had this thing for close to 20 years. This is a titanium one, and I like this. It's, a quart or something like that, but you can put plenty of water in here for one of those freeze-dried meals. Now to get water heated up, I'm using this little MSR pocket rocket stove. I'm not sure what the exact model is on this one, but I'm sure you look at it, you can find this same thing on their website or on Amazon or wherever you're getting your stuff from. And then these things, this goes with these little isobutane canisters. Now, one of the problems with these little pocket rocket stoves that use these isobutane canisters is that over time, you just kind of accumulate a bunch of these things, and they're half full or a quarter full or something like that. And if you're going on a backpacking trip, you don't really want to take a canister that's a quarter full, because you're going to get 1 or 2 burns out of it, and then it's going to be spent, and then you got to pack the thing around. So one of the things that I just recently picked up was this little kit that I got off of Amazon. This is some generic thing, Horinair. There's a bunch of different, they're branded a bunch of different ways, but I'm sure they're all made by the same people. But it's got this little valve in here. You can connect 2 of these bottles. You put one of them in the freezer, and the other one is just room temperature, and you can transfer fuel from one to the other. So you can take those canisters that are just partials and empty them all into one, and then refill your canisters, and then just get rid of the empties after that. This thing is fantastic. It was like 15 bucks or something like that. It was pretty cheap, and it saves you from having just a bunch of partial canisters like this. So this year in Alaska, I'm gonna be taking this Platypus water filter. This is a great filter system for a base camp. This isn't something you're gonna be wanting to like hike around with all the time, but for setting this back up at camp, I think there's like a 2-liter dirty bag, flows through the filter, and then goes to your clean bag down here. This is a really good option. I've used this a lot over the years. One of my all-time favorite water filter systems for a base camp. And then I think the last little thing that I've got here is just a kind of an emergency medical kit. When some of these trips that we take, when we go out there, we're out there. Like, we are miles and miles and miles. Where we're gonna be in Alaska, we're gonna be 100 river miles from anywhere. And it's either you get medevaced out, or you've got many hours to wait for somebody to come and get you in a boat. And sometimes they can't even get there. The weather's too bad. They're just not going to be able to get to you. And so being prepared for whatever might come up is pretty important on those trips. So this I got from Survival Doctors, and it's just got, look it up. You can see all the different stuff that's in there. And the other thing is, know how to use this stuff. If you got this in your pack and you have no idea how to use it, not going to do you any good. I also always have with me my little inReach Mini, and this is a satellite communication device. I don't know what they cost, maybe 400 bucks for one, and then you sign up for a monthly subscription. You can get a base plan for like 12 or 15 bucks a month or something like that. And this is for the backcountry stuff that I do. This is the only way that I can communicate with the outside world. So if something happens at home here, Liz can send me a text, I can know about it. Or if something happens and, I fall off a cliff and break a leg or something like that, I can call for help and get somebody to come assist me. So that was a lot of stuff to go over. It's not something that I typically do, but going into the hunting season, I thought it was good to do a video that just kind of covers a lot of the different stuff that I use and that I have used over the years. So I hope y'all picked up something from this video that'll help you in the field. And good luck this season, and we'll see you on the next one. Wish us luck in Alaska.